we've had this conversation before that what makes the Patriots unique is that they don't have a system, but they do game plans. And week to week, they can be completely different. But it means that on offense in particular, that you've gone through several different iterations of essentially the same system, but they look completely different. You know, you've had this system that used the two tight ends, the Gronkowski and Hernandez. You've had the Randy Moss and Wes Welker era.
They were spreading out when teams were still wearing too tight
you've
fullbacks.
Had the area where everybody was a slot receiver. Like, they didn't have legitimate big bodies outside. You had everything that worked over the middle. Everybody was an Edelman, an Amendola, or Gronkowski. You didn't have a perimeter threat. And now it's, okay, Gronkowski's gone. What does it look like now? And then you draft N'Keal Harry in the first round. It's like, well, what does that look like? Because if there's and N'Keal Harry does a lot of things really well. One of them isn't separate. Like, if you look at his targets, he's not open ever. Now, he makes some spectacular plays despite that. But when you're pulling up a guy's highlight reel after they draft him, you're like, every single one of these catches there's a guy draped all over him. That's kind of concerning in a league where the trend right now is to get guys that will get open, because typically guys that just win contested catches don't at the next level, or at least they don't do it consistently well. The highest people in the NFL in terms of winning contested catches are at like 60-something%.
Yeah, and it's tough to be that consistent.
Right, which is just about the baseline of, general receptions. So if you're saying the very best at doing this specific skill can only get it done about the baseline of catching, it means most people are nowhere near that, so it's not a good thing. If you're always expecting a quarterback to make the ball contested, that's not a great thing. It was interesting. I saw another N'Keal Harry highlight reel or highlight clip show up on Twitter the other day. It was like a bubble screen, and it was N'Keal Harry turns nothing into something. Bubble screen, and then he ends up like reversing field 7 times and go.
He had multiple plays like that.
Yeah, but this one, it was only nothing because he dropped the bubble screen, which I thought was kind of funny. It's like, drops it, picks it up, now he's in hell because the play's gone, and suddenly he ends up reversing field a couple of times and making a positive play. Like, okay. On the other hand, if you just caught the bubble screen in the first place, maybe it might have been better. But
it's like when you fumble, you bobble the punt a little bit, and it screws up the.
He's just this fascinating player because the stuff that he does well, he's really good at. He's a great contested catch guy. He's great after the catch or with the ball in his hands, however it gets there, whether it's a drop, then a scoop. But he's really good at that stuff. It's just that I don't ever see him get a separation on the outside. So does he become like New England's version of Marcus Colston, like a big slot that operates inside, that has some bubble screen, trick play kind of capability, like a cross between Marcus Colston and Cordero Patterson?
Does he work the middle of the field a little bit? So that I initially said I think he could replace what they had in Brandon LaFell a few years ago, and that's going back a few years, where LaFell would run, the back shoulder stuff against man coverage, run slants, do some things in the red zone, run some shallow crosses, things like that. You can scheme people open too. It's not all, when it comes to Harry. But I also think when you look at how many tight window throws Brady did make to Gronk, right? There are certain times you have to make those, right? Oh, yeah. So they have to be replaced by somebody. So is it a N'Keal Harry? Is it a Demaryius Thomas? Is it a Dontrell Inman? I think they're trying to find, all right, when we do have to beat man coverage and nobody's open, because there are a lot of plays like that in the NFL. Nobody is open, and you do have to back shoulder. You do have to throw it up and away from coverage. Give us a couple big catch radius guys. So you have a few of those guys competing for some snaps. You have an Edelman that can still get open. And then I think the other interesting aspect for the Patriots is they continue to stack up running backs. They use a fullback more than anybody. Now, they're not a power run team. This whole narrative that all of a sudden it's like, well, the Patriots are weaving when everybody else is bobbing and they're just going to run the ball. Like, they threw the ball 100 times in the first 2 games in the playoffs, right? But they do use James Devlin at fullback more than anyone else. They have Sony Michel, who's more of a runner than a pass catcher. They still have Rex Burkhead, James White, and they drafted Damian Harris. I think we will see more formations, and they've already started this, where there are 2 legitimate running backs out there, non-Devlin types, and they split one wide, and then one's in the backfield, and that's their way of... They've created mismatches with extra wide receivers before. They've created mismatches with extra tight ends. I think now they're in this, let's create mismatches with extra running backs. right? We put James White out wide, and we put Burkhead in the backfield. Or we put both of them in the backfield, and you can run all sorts of stuff out of that. They did a lot with Cordero Patterson last year, who was essentially a running back / wide receiver. So I think that's where they're going, is just creating mismatches in different ways without a Gronk.
For years, the thing, maybe the single most defining characteristic of their offense has been finding ways to make you wrong from a personnel standpoint. So, generally before every single play, defenses take a look at who's in the huddle, and then that's how they calculate what personnel they're going to run. So whether you're in base, whether you're in nickel, dime, et cetera, it's all down to the count, right? How many wide receivers, how many running backs, how many tight ends are in the offensive huddle. That determines what we're going to line up with on defense. So the Patriots for years have basically been working on ways to screw that up. So when you look in the huddle, you're wrong because you look, Cordero Patterson's in there, wide receiver, DB comes on. It's like, oh, crap, now he's in the backfield. He's a running back. We've got a corner on the field. We've screwed up.
To me, that's the biggest mismatch. The Patriots started this back with the late Aaron Hernandez.
Right.
Where it's like he's
a tight end.
He's a tight end.
Keep a linebacker on the field.
But with him, they were like, oh, he's a wide receiver. So we have to put a DB.
Or a running back.
But then when they turned him into a running back, that's what I'm saying. That's what completely changed the game. Pittsburgh did this a little bit with Ryan Switzer the last couple of years, is put Switzer in the backfield as a runner. Our boy Mike Renner was tweeting about this the other day. It's not a unique idea, but saying, that's kind of like the next mismatch opportunity is when a guy who's a wide receiver and is accounted for as a wide receiver becomes a running back. And the Patriots have dabbled with this before. They'll start Edelman in the backfield and then motion him out and all that stuff. So I think it's either guys that shouldn't be carrying the ball that are carrying the ball, or multiple guys who can carry the ball.
The Patriots, I think, have probably been the best team at doing that for years.
Yep.
And they do it more consistently than anybody else. There are a lot of teams that have specific motions, and try and do it for a key situation. It's 3rd and 8. Let's try and manufacture a mismatch because we need to pick up 8 yards. The Patriots, I think, do it as a staple part of the offense more than anybody else.
Yeah. And honestly, I think they've been more creative than ever the last couple of years. It used to be like, all right, Welker's generally going to be in one of these couple spots. And the last couple of years, they were really, really interchangeable with all of their receivers.
And I think their system lends itself to this more than others because, the way it works, you can run everything from every personnel and formation. And it's just easier to start messing around with stuff like that than it is for, pick another random offense. Andy Reid's offense is going to be harder to do that because everybody needs to know everybody else's specific role with the verbiage, et cetera, et cetera. You need to cross-train players by position. The Patriots, you don't. You just need to understand where you're lining up, and then you're good to go.